Namaskar, my name is Nileshok, and this will be my first presentation on Sugriva's Atlas, or you can say, just like Valmiki Ramayana is a Adi Kavya, you can think of this as a Adi GPS, one of the world's first GPS, if not the first. This is Sugriva's description of the world geography of Ramayana times. So in this talk, I will quickly refer to the Valmiki Ramayana time and then Sugriva's descriptions of the four directions, beginning with India as the center. And in a very limited time, I will describe some of the key specific geographical features that Sugriva describes and how they perfectly match to the timing of Ramayana. So Sugriva's Atlas, from Andes in the east all the way to the Alps in the west, and from Antarctica in the south all the way to the Arctic Sea in the north. Number of you may be or will be familiar with Saptarshi Ramayanam. This is a very good summary of entire Valmiki Ramayana, including the Uttarakanda, and it's attributed to different rishis of the Saptarshi Mandal. Okay, it's a good way of remembering the summary of Valmiki Ramayana. Out of this, the particular aspect that I'm going to describe, it's not there in at least the summary of a Saptarshi Ramayana. Okay, so something that was not covered is in the Saptarshi Ramayana is what I am going to cover, which is of course there in very detail in Valmiki Ramayana. So this is this time when Sugriva and Ram have met, and eventually Sugriva invites Vanaras from all different parts of the world. He divides them into four parties and sends them in the four directions. And he gives them the directional landmarks so that they know how far to go and where to look for Sita. Quickly, to set the timing of Valmiki Ramayana, and it's very important because the descriptions given by Sugriva can only be meaningfully understood if we understand the timing of Ramayana. And I'll briefly describe why that is so. But let's just begin with the Valmiki Ramayana itself. My work of some 25 plus years, I initially began working on the dating of Mahabharata. Then I started working on the dating of Ramayana. And to my surprise, I found more than 500, in fact, close to 600 specific astronomy-related descriptions, evidence, observations from Valmiki Ramayana. And when you test them in a scientific fashion, put them together like solving a jigsaw puzzle, it leads you to 13th millennium BCE, which is to say approximately more than 14,000 years ago from our times, as the timing of Ramayana. Not only that, we actually can identify, of course by luck, because such an evidence does exist in Valmiki Ramayana, very specific dating for specific events of Ramayana. In fact, the first event that I could identify with the help of very rich astronomy evidence was the year of Ram Ravan Yuddha, and that comes to 12,209 BCE. And then using additional 500 plus evidence and the chronological markers from Valmiki Ramayana, I could able to determine the dating for various events of Ramayana. Just to illustrate how this evidence looks like, I am going to pull 6 specific pieces of evidence from Valmiki Ramayana. That takes you to 13th millennium BCE. For example, right now we are celebrating Rama Janma, the Chaitra Shukla Navami. And right now, if you look at the timing of lunar month of Chaitra, it falls in the second half of Vasanta Rutu. But we know that Ramayana did not happen in our times. And there, if a number of you would be familiar with the phenomenon, the astronomy phenomenon known as the precession of the Earth's axis. And what that does is every 2000 years, it shifts the lunar month of our Indian calendar, such as Chaitra, Vaishak, Jeshta, Ashad, and so on. It shifts by approximately 1 month's time period with respect to the season or with respect to the Rutu, such as Vasanta Rutu and Grishma Rutu and so on. So we have to go back in time to figure out the timing of Chaitra, which also matches with the description of Chaitra given in Valmiki Ramayana. For example, there are many descriptions of Chaitra in Valmiki Ramayana. I'm just quoting one of the many. The description of the Chaitra is given here in this form of an analogy, but you can find the factual descriptions also. Iti bruvanta mudita pratyanandana nrupanrupam vrishtimantam mahamegam nardanta iva barhinaha. This is described as the time when sky is filled with clouds, ready to pour rain, and the peacocks are dancing. Okay, this is the time period of rainy season or the Sharat season. Let's go to the next one. When Ram, Lakshman, Sita are in Panchavati, and Lakshman is describing the Hemanta Rutu in Panchavati, he describes the position of the setting sun with respect to nakshatra. He says, Nivrutta Akasha Shayana Pushyanita Himaruna. The sun is setting on the nakshatra Pushya at the time of Hemanta Rutu. If you read those Aranyakanda portions, you will see very beautiful descriptions of the 24-hour time period during the Hemanta Rutu. If we apply astronomy knowledge to this particular reference of sun setting on the Pushya nakshatra during the Hemanta Rutu, we get a time period that goes from, say, 11,000 BC to 17,000 BC. Let's go to the next one. When the rainy season is beginning, just before that, there is a description of Bharat taking vows for the Chaturmasa. And a number of you would know the Chaturmas begins with the rainy season, in our times, the month of Ashad through Kartik. Here, that Ashadim that is referred to is again not the Ashadi of our times when the rain season begins, but in fact, this is the nakshatra of the sun. The sun is in the Ashad at the time of summer solstice. In fact, in Maharashtra, there is a tradition, and I was told even in Karnataka, that is a tradition, that early rain of the monsoon season, in Maharashtra, it is referred to as Mrugatsa Paus, okay, the rain due to Mruga Nakshatra. And again, the Mruga Nakshatra that is referred to refers to the sun's position in Mruga Nakshatra. Very beautifully, Valmiki Ramayana describes the pole stars of its own time. For example, a very interesting reference with respect to the star Canopus or star Agastya. Sugriva is saying you have to go really, really to the far south of the Indian peninsula before you can see star Canopus. And why is that? Because right now we can see star Canopus from as up in the north as New Delhi. But there, at that time, one has to go all the way to the Mahendra Parvat, okay, at the southwest corner of India to see Agastya, because Agastya had become a pole star. It was to the extreme south. Not only that, I will show you the pole star in the north of Ramayana times in a minute. But one more reference that refers to the fourth cardinal point is when Angad is very frustrated that they haven't found Sita. And he looks at the signs, the seasonal signs. They have left in the Sharat season. And now he says, look, we are searching for Sita for such a long time. Now I see the signs of spring. And in fact, even that season is passing away. And in that reference, he refers to Vayam Ashvayuje Masi Kala Sankhya Vyavastita Prastita So Pichatita Kimatat Karyam Uttaram. He says, this is the season of spring. That is not in this particular verse, but if you read the verses, you will say it before and after. And he says, even this month of Ashwin is also passing away. All right. And last one, the North Pole Star of Ramayana times is described, given with its proper name, Brahma Rashir Vishuddhasya Shuddhasya Paramarshaya Archishmanta Prakashante Dhruvam Sarve Pradakshanam. Brahma Rashi, Abhijit, Vega is the pole star, and the Saptarshis are going around it. If you just put these 6 references together, it will take you to 13th millennium BC. Okay. And the specific year of 12,209 BC for the year of Ram Ravan Yuddha, and 12,240 BC for Rama Janma. All right. If you would like to read more about this detailed evidence, you can pick up a copy of my book, 12,209 BC, easy to remember when the Ram Ravan Yuddha happened. And this, of course, discusses the specific dating, the evidence, how I arrived at these dates in this book for the events of Ramayana. And then the other books refer to my work on the dating of Mahabharata. These are the books if you are outside India on Amazon. The previous ones are the books that are available inside India and that is through Subbu Publications. Let's begin with our 4 directions. So Sugriva divides the Vanara search parties into 4 groups, and he sends them in the 4 directions, give them a time limit, and tells them to come back. Okay, the East party is going to give a direction from India, starting with India. Another party goes to the south, another party goes to the west, and the 4th last party goes to the north. What briefly I can summarize is, if you read the descriptions of Valmiki Ramayana, and if you understand world geography and try to match it, you will find essentially all the areas that I have highlighted, except that middle portion of the Atlantic. Sugriva is essentially showing awareness of the knowledge of the world for every area that I have essentially highlighted. Before we get into the actual directional evidence, let's quickly look at the genetics and archaeology evidence, especially genetic evidence to define the east direction. Okay, this is a paper, genetics paper from 2015, and what it shows is a statistically significant evidence for a genetic trail starting with India and going all the way to East Asia through Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, Polynesia, Australia, all the way to the South America. Okay. And if you look at the timing of this, it goes back in deep antiquity, but we will actually look at some archaeology evidence and also, of course, the Ramayana evidence. If we look at the archaeology evidence, now genetic trail does show, okay, the evidence going all the way to South America. But even archaeology data shows human presence in South America as early as 33,000 BCE in Chile or 50,000 BCE in Panama. These are some very recent papers. And in that context, when you realize that Sugriva is talking of only 14,000 years ago, now we can say only 14,000 years ago, right? Okay. As Sugriva is describing to the party going in the east direction, what are some of the things that they may land into and that may tell them that they're searching for Sita in the right direction or right places? He describes human beings with all kinds of interesting features. And I'm going to, without describing, I'm going to show you, if you go in the east direction, you are going to run into individuals like this. For example, this is the lady in Laos where they artificially extend their necks. Or if you go to Papua New Guinea, people add many attachments. So the descriptions of Sugriva, where he describes some people whose lips come all the way to their waist and so on, that can match. These are artificial appendages in some cases. Or if you look at this Dayak woman from Indonesia, and who pull their earlobes, okay? And Sugriva again describes all these kinds of modifications that people make. And if we go all the way to South America, then we are going to see an individual like from Zoe tribe who cuts the bottom of their mouth and a certain wood that they shape it like what is shown, and they put it from inside the mouth so that it always hangs around. And then they always wash it every day and so on and so forth. So some of the descriptions that Sugriva is describing, especially going in the east directions, very much match like this. For example, he refers to certain people as Loha Mukha. Now, this picture recently came up. A number of you might have seen it. This could match for Loha Mukha. I'm not saying necessarily Sugriva was referring to these specific individuals, but very interesting. And by the way, this one is from Papua New Guinea. I'm going to fast forward and take you all the way to South America. There, the vampire bats are described as Mandeha Rakshasa. And if you read the descriptions and read the translation, you will immediately realize that first thing is referring to the bats. And bats are all over the world. So what's the big deal about the bats in South America? Well, this is the big deal. South America is the only place where we have blood-sucking bats. Most of the other bats around the world are frugivorous, okay? Granted, they will eat insects and whatnot, but otherwise, mostly they will eat seeds and fruits and whatnot. But in South America, these different varieties of vampire bats, they will suck the blood from animals and whatnot. They are frightening Rakshasas, Ramayana says, called Mandeha, of different forms, different species, fearsome, hanging down the mountain peaks. And that should tell you, if you read the detailed description, it will tell you that the Ramayana is referring to bats. Those Rakshasas keep dropping down in water at the time of sunrise every day, scorched by the heat of the sun. Again and again, they keep hanging onto the cliffs. Okay, they go back and do that. But that's not the only evidence. Now we know that South America had multiple species, but the next one I'm going to show you, it's beautiful. You're going to love it. On the west coast of Peru, they have a structure engraved into these colorful rocks on the west coast. Okay, the approximate dimensions is known as a Candelabra of Andes, and the dimensions are like 600 to 800 feet tall, 2 to 3 feet deep, as if like it's engraved, it's dug, and it can be seen from as far as 12 miles in the sea. Now, what does that have to do with Valmiki Ramayana? Well, when Spaniards came to South America and they asked the locals if they made this structure, they said, no, we did not make it. When they asked if your forefathers made it, they said, no, to the best of our knowledge, our forefathers did not make it either. In fact, if we asked them, they said it was always there. So nobody knows who made this structure, what was it made up for, and when was it made. Guess what? It is, all these three questions are answered in the Valmiki Ramayana text. For example, if you go to the Kishkinda Kand and the Sarga 40, as Sugriva is describing the east direction and how far they have to go, Sugriva says, then after you cross the ocean, which is the Pacific Ocean, Kshirosagar, he says, you will come across this structure. Remember, they're going in the east direction, and when they go east, they're going to end up at the western coast of Peru, or the whole western South America, western coast of South America. He describes it as Trishira Kanchana Ketus Talas Tasya Mahatmanaha Stapita Parvatasyagre Virajati Savedikaha. Okay, quick crude translation, a three-headed golden flag, okay, shining on the top of the mountain with Savedika, Vedi at the base. You can see, some of you can see the rectangle at the bottom. Okay, not only that, it goes further and it explains why it was created, possibly who created and when it was created. Purvasya Dishi Nirmanam, it was done to define the east direction, possibly the end of east direction. Okay, Krutam tat Tridasheshwarai Tatah Parahemamaya Sriman Udaya Parvata. It was created by Parabrahma, Tridasheshware, Indra. Okay, you can take whatever you like there. More likely Indra. Also remember, Indra is the deity of the east direction. And it says beyond that is the Hemamaya Parvata. Okay, so a mountain covered with snow and ice, and it's called Udaya Parvata. Okay, that is the rising mountain. Okay, the east direction. Obviously, it is referring to Andes. Because of a time limit, I'm going to go fast through some other directions. And then it says it was created during a Kruta Yuga. That's how some translators, some acharyas have translated that Krutam. It can be taken as manufactured, made, created, but it has taken by some as created during Kruta Yuga. Okay, let's quickly go in the south direction. Starting with India, starting from India, we are talking all about going in the south direction. This is important direction because that's where people are suspecting Ravana must have taken Sita. All right, not everything in this direction is known, but remember, anytime Sugriva starts describing, he starts from the center of India. So he starts with Narmada in this case, and then he's talking of Krishna, Venya, Kaveri, and Godavari and whatnot, and comes all the way quickly to Tamraparni, okay? All the way to the Tamraparni. Now, the arrow where it ends, that's where the Tamraparni begins, okay? From the Malaya Mountains or Saya Mountains, the Western Mountains, and flows eastward. Now, what is interesting is just one verse before that, if you see, there says, once you go all the way there to Malaya Parvata, okay? And then he's going to talk about the Mahindra Parvat there too. Then he says, Drakshata Aditya Sankasham Agastyam Rishisattamam. Once you go that far, then only you will able to see Agastya Rishi. Very interesting. He uses the word Rishi for the star, Agastya star. He uses the word Muni for Agastya as an individual that Ram, Lakshmana and Sita run into when they come to Panchavati. Okay. So that's very important. And again, as I said, the reason Vanara party would have to go that far before they can see Agastya is because Agastya has become a pole star during this time, the time we are referring to, the 13 millennium BC. And astronomically, that can be verified. In fact, in the diagram, this bottom portion shown with this red line is the area from which, just below that latitude only, you can see Agastya. Above that, you could not have seen Agastya during the Mahabharata times. That's what Valmiki Ramayana is describing, as if like 1 feet of Agastya is there on the Mahindra Parvat and other feet all the way into the ocean, which is the point of South Celestial Pole. It very well matches for 12,209 BC. This was brought to my attention by Mrs. Rupa Bhatti, another researcher. Okay, so when I did the Ramayana research, I actually missed this reference. I did not recognize the significance of these verses. So that was something beautiful. Then Sugriva describes how to go to Lanka. He says from that point, you have to go further 100 yojanas. You can take this as a figuratively or literal distance. We will not go into the details of the Ravana's Lanka, but just to briefly mention that based on a Ramayana descriptions, what he's pointing to is to go from the southwest corner of India towards further in a straight line, or if anything, slightly towards the southwest direction, definitely not the east direction. And I have given us a whole separate talk why Sri Lanka could not be or may not be Ravana's Lanka at all. But that will make this talk too long, so I'm going to skip that. Then Sugriva says for the south direction, he describes many other things, but then he says, if you continue to go to the end, you will go to Rajdhani Yamasya Esha Kashtena Tamasavruta. You'll go to the capital of Yama. Okay, he's referring to Antarctica. He says it's covered with the darkness. Now we know that, if it's a certain time of the year, it will be full of light, almost 24 hours, but other times it will be in a complete darkness, practical darkness. Okay, but what he's saying is he's aware of it, but he's not asking Vanaras to go that far. He's simply asking wanderers to not go there. And he says, if you go there, it is very difficult to come back. I'm just telling you, don't go that far. Okay. And that's that Antarctica. And if I had time, I would have gone into more details. But because of the time limitations, let's move on. Just one point I'll mention, that something that Sugriva is describing very confidently. From a Western European perspective, they were not aware of it. And even when afterwards some of their individuals had found it, they were still not confident, like as late as end of 19th century, about the presence of Antarctica. Meaning even when people had landed, they were not sure if it was just an iceberg or truly there was a land, okay? As late as 19th century, end of 19th century. Very interesting. But there are many old maps and they show the geography of Antarctica, including rivers on it. And we know from the geology studies that at some point, Antarctica was free from the ice, but we have to go back thousands and thousands of years before to have a condition like this. Quickly, let's go into the west direction. Sushena is the head for that direction, that Wanara party. They start from the central India again, going through Rajasthan, I mean, through the desert area, like, Rana, and then going towards Balochistan, Afghanistan, Iran, and through Iraq, Turkey, Romania, they're describing all the way to Alps. Okay, but before we go there, he's describing certain area of Afghanistan, like what we know Afghanistan now, Gandhar, and he says, don't go to their gardens and pluck any fruits. Okay, they are fierce warriors, and unnecessarily you will waste time fighting with them. The important point I want to mention is that the Gandharas, okay, so whatever you want to call it, Gandharvas, whatever the way they were called, they existed more than 14,000 years ago. They were well established at that time. Okay. All right. And then he describes multiple mountains and so on and so forth. A series of mountains he describes in the west direction. Therefore, I'm showing you the map of the west direction as starting from India, going all the way to Alps. You will see all that red color. Okay, that is all mountains or mountain ranges. Not a surprise that that's what he describes. Okay. Many mountains he describes. I'm just taking few names just for illustration. Pariyatra, Vajra, Chakravan, Varaha, Megha, a huge mountain range, Meru, and then last mountain, which I am saying we can identify with the Alps, that is the Astagiri. Okay. Finally, he's saying don't go beyond these Astagiri. Okay. All right. And he says, I don't know anything beyond that mountain range. Okay, so that's Astagiri mountain. He also describes a similar structure, but this time possibly with 10 branches, similar to what we saw on the East Coast in the west direction. We haven't found it. Now, some individuals living in that area did send me some photographs, and it needs additional research, but something very interesting to research on. Quickly, I will mention like how that direction looked like. Marubhumi, it refers to Marubhumi. So the desert, Rajasthan desert existed even more than 14,000 years ago. The Valmiki Ramayana refers to the ocean on our western side, what we call Arabian Sea, as a Sindhu Sagar, something very interesting. Then it refers to many mountains. We don't know exact identification, but approximate identification appears to be right. Hemagiri, then Pariyatra mountain, then Vajra mountain, then the Chakravan mountain, possibly, that one that in the Iran and that goes around the Caspian Sea. That time Caspian Sea would be a Caspian lake, a huge lake. Then it refers to Varaha mountain, possibly the mountains of Turkey. Very interesting, guys. It refers to Prag Jyotisham, okay, a place called Prag Jyotisham, and it also refers to connecting with a Narakasur. Very important to realize that the Prag Jyotisham related to Narakasur existed in the west direction. That is the description. That is how it is described in Valmiki Ramayana. That is how it is described in Vyasa's Mahabharata. Now, many of us are aware of a Pragjyotish in the east, like towards Assam, and that could be another place. But as far as the Valmiki Ramayana and Mahabharata goes, especially these journeys, in this case, Sugriva's description, in case of Mahabharata, it is Arjuna's journey in the northwest direction. They both describe Pragjyotish. In this case, it's also connected with a Narkasur. And I have done some research work to show that more than likely that Pragjyotish referred to what we call modern day Baghdad. Okay, but let's move on. And so if we go all the way to these various mountain ranges and Meghavanta mountain ranges, that's in the Romania area. And then, of course, finally, all the way to Andes. Meru Savarni. Sugriva describes a sage named Meru Savarni doing tapascharya in those mountain ranges. Okay, and he says, therefore, one of the mountain ranges called Meru. And then, of course, that's where it describes that 10-armed structure that I referred to. And then finally, Astagiri. And he says, don't go beyond this. Quickly, the last direction. Now, so that's Astagiri there. You can see the snow on the Alps there. And of course, the Udaya Parvata, which is the Andes, okay, in the east, like the west coast of South America. But the point I want to make it is that something that Sugriva is going to say in the north direction, very important. First thing, he doesn't ask them, he tells them not to go beyond Astagiri for a reason, and we'll see what the reason is. Same thing going in the north direction. What I'm showing you is the landscape with the area, geographical area covered with huge glaciers that ran from 20,000 BC or even before all the way to 12,000 BC. Okay, the whole entire northern Europe, but entire North America, a significant portion of North America. Okay, we'll not go into the reasons why that was the case, but it's very important as Sugriva describes the north direction. Shatabali is the head in that direction. So approximately what is Sugriva referring to? Sugriva referring to this direction going all the way to the Arctic Sea. Not many people recognize, but there are areas north of what we consider today's India, and those areas Uttara Madra and Uttara Kuru. Uttara Kuru exist in the Ramayana times, Uttara Kuru exist in the Mahabharata times. In this north direction, starting with some central India, think of this as a Lucknow. Sugriva refers to many of the mountain ranges. We don't know exactly which one is which, Sudarshana, Devasakha. Okay, then he says you will go further, and if you see there, it says Prasthalan Bharatan Chaiva Kurum Cha Saha Madraka. He's referring to the Madra land and Bharata or the Kuru land. Okay, and certain areas like a Darad, which is like extreme northern Pakistan and modern day Pakistan, and so on. Okay, this is this area of Uttara Madra, Uttara Kuru. Okay. Sugriva is referring to the area of Kailash mountain, okay, and some beautiful descriptions. For example, this area he describes as Aparvata Nadi Vruksham Sarva Sattva Vivarjitam. Okay, it's a mountainous area, but no rivers and no trees. Okay, and you can see that. Then he describes the Manas Sarovar. Most of us know that. Okay, so he says Avruksham Kama Shailam Cha Manasam Vihaga Alayam, a beautiful Manasa lake. Okay, but even that area, he says it's a Avruksham. Okay, there are not many trees in that area, and you can see that in these pictures. Okay, and the mountain range that you see here at the bottom here is now Chinese have given a different name because China controls that area. But in our old text, you can find that this mountain range was known as Mandhata Mountains. Very interesting. Okay. Then Sugriva describes some other landscapes in that area, something very interesting. The area is filled with snow, no vruksham, so no trees. Okay, filled with rivers. The rivers are a certain type of bamboo, a specific type of bamboo plants. They grow on the both sides of the river. The area is referred to, or the river is referred to as a Shailoda in Ramayana. You will see the same name slightly modified in Mahabharata. Okay, but he says, Sugriva says, Ubayo tirayo tasya kichaka nama venava. A certain type of bamboo known as a kichaka grows on both sides of the plantation. If you look at the geographical area for the plantation of the bamboos, what you'll find it surprising that indeed this area forms the one extreme north boundary of this area that is suitable for bamboo plantation. And this is a different kind of bamboo plant. In fact, I asked one researcher who had access to this area to see if they still have bamboo plantations and what is the name of that bamboo. And it doesn't match with Kichaka, but the name does start with a K, like a Kshlemer or something like this, something very fascinating. And I just came to know of this information of what the name they use for the bamboo just 4 or 5 days ago. Anyways, just moving on, a beautiful area, you can find precious stones, lots of rivers, and so such information is there. Now, what is interesting is he's now telling the geography all the way to the end of that land mass, which is to say, going all the way to the Uttara Samudra, his Arctic Sea. He's calling it Tam Atikramya Shailendram. After you pass all that, Uttara Payasam Nidhi, then you will come to the northern water body, referring to the Arctic Sea. Tatra Somagirir Nama Madhye Hemamayo Mahan. Now, this is the area of the North Pole. Okay, something interesting. You know, he's describing in a interesting fashion. He says, Satu Desho Visurya, as if like there is no sun. Again, we know, depending on the time of the day, there is a lot of sun, but at other times, almost there is a darkness. But he says something very interesting. He says, there is no sun, as if Satu Desho Visurya, api tasya bhasa prakashate, Surya Lakshma abhividneya tapata iva vivaswata. You will see this description in Ramayana. Interestingly, you will also see this description in Mahabharata. And I'm conjecturing many other researchers have done this before, that Sugriva might be referring to this beautiful aurora borealis, okay, the northern lights that are seen in the extreme north, and they can truly shine, okay, truly make the area brighter. These are just dancing colors, okay, changing colors. And it's beautiful to see. I have seen them in person. Now he says, I'm telling you of Northern Sea, but do not go all the way to the Arctic Sea. Why is he saying that? He says, no kathanchana gantavyam kurunam uttarenava. In fact, he says, do not go any point beyond Uttara Kuru, kurunam uttarenava. Why? Again, remember, we know if we go back 14,000 years ago, the landmass was not accessible as it is today because the glaciers had come down. And this picture shows you how far the glaciers were down. But I'm going to show you one more picture, okay? And just mark the area of Uttara Kuru, the boundary of Uttara Kuru. So if the glaciers are here, why is he saying don't go beyond this? If you look at this area, the way it existed in 13 millennium BC, for example, here, let me see, yeah, above this light pink area, it was like tundra, okay? So it was not accessible, it was not easy to go, subarctic, okay? It had treacherous conditions. And again, Sugriva is saying, don't go beyond that. It is very difficult to travel. And if you go there, you will not able to come back. Okay. So that's how Sugriva describes it. And then I hope you are as fascinated as Bhagwan Ram was fascinated when Sugriva described this. And so Bhagwan Ram asked Sugriva, how did he come to know of all this area? And then quickly Sugriva describes that the story of his fighting with Wali, his brother. And when Sugriva was removed from the kingdom and he was going around or living outside the area of Kishkinda, because of the fear of Wali, he says, he went to different places, traveled around. And he had actually been to these places. Okay, so for example, I'll just highlight few areas. So Purva Disham Tato Gatva, he describes how far he went in the east direction up to Udaya Parvata, okay, or in the west direction all the way to the Astagiri, right? So that's what he describes. In the north direction, he went all the way to the Uttara Samudra, and of course in south direction, he does describe the capital of Yama. All right, so this is where we will stop. If you would like to read the summary, you can read that in a Saptarshi Ramayana, not the summary of a Sugriva's atlas, but a summary of Ramayana itself. And I hope that this encourages you to, each one of you, to go back to the original Valmiki Ramayana with appropriate translation if that is required. And please explore Valmiki Ramayana for yourself to see what a beautiful treasure it is, how many different things that are there described in Valmiki Ramayana, but we are not aware of them because many of us don't take the effort to read Valmiki Ramayana. Namaskar.